cover up four key topics tonight. So primary and secondary breathing muscles. We're going to go through a little bit of theory. A lot of people actually do not know beyond the commercial abs what the core actually is and how much of an influence it really has on breathing. So Anastasis is going to take you through that. We're then going to compare the male and female pelvis, something that I specialize in, and we'll really do proper introductions in a minute. But my name is Georgie, and I'll tell you all about myself in just a moment. But just to give you a brief overview so I can get you guys revved up and excited, female and male pelvic differences and what effect that has on movement. And then I'm going to share with you some key exercises for the pelvis and how they correlate to functional breathing. And then Anastasis is going to talk about functional breathing, the effects on balance in yoga. He is the leader of the Breathing for Yoga course with the Oxygen Advantage. So some really exciting stuff coming your way. It's going to be really, really good. So I'm looking forward to it massively. I hope you are too. So I'm just going to hear from Anastasis just to make sure everything is okay with him. And then we'll get it going. Oh, there you are. Gotcha.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for some technical problems we were having up until a few minutes ago. Hopefully, they're no longer going to interrupt the session. Georgie and I have worked before, so it is not the first time we're coming together. We have run some podcasts. We have, we've done other things as well. And today, this is the start of the things that we are doing over the summer, and which you will know more about during this workshop. If you are going to have to leave early, don't worry, because this masterclass is going to be recorded and become available afterwards. And we will be also available to reach out to us if you want us to elaborate. We have a lot of complimentary material. This is also just 1 hour and a half. And obviously, we will do our best to answer all questions. We're actually going to have a time at the end for questions. So please write them down. I find that if we address all the questions together, they make more sense. And if they are scattered, maybe they are a little bit like they are on topics that we will be covering later on, or they are like a little bit like, there's not so much coherence. So I suggest I quickly introduce myself and then Georgie will, and then I'll take back the microphone, the virtual microphone, and start the session following the plan that Georgie just described. So I'm Oxygen Advantage instructor. I'm a 𝗚𝗲cie method instructor. I have done the Wim Hof method training, and these are the formal ways of my studies in breathing. I usually take pride on telling people that when I was teaching yoga, before I did all this training, I was not teaching much breathing at all because I didn't understand it enough. And I want to believe that now on the things that I cover, I think I understand them and I can justify them. And that means that some things maybe will be controversial, or they may sound controversial the way I describe them, but I can support them. So if you don't agree with me, great, because that means that we can have a conversation at the end of this session. I believe that if I was to put in one sentence, what I believe around breathing is that biomechanics and biochemistry go hand in hand. They don't belong to different people or different bodies or different schools of thought or different approaches. They always coexist. And to the extent that we pay attention to both, I believe a lot of you are very much tuned in with the biochemistry, having been following Patrick McCone's work. But, and I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about biomechanics as well. But yes, the biomechanics, there are many people, I usually say when I teach the Breathing for Yoga course, there are many people that cured themselves from asthma just by practicing yoga and not knowing a thing about breathing. Would they be benefiting even more by knowing everything that Patrick teaches? 100%. But, and this is partly what we will be covering today. Yeah, Georgie as well is very knowledgeable on the biomechanics. He will be covering lots of topics on pelvic floor. So yeah, thanks for joining today. Georgie, it's on you.
Sure. Hi guys. So my name is Georgie and I'm a master instructor also of the Oxygen Advantage, and I am the creator of the female breathing course. So that is a course on how to self-regulate and to tailor your sports performance around the female menstrual cycle. And we had a really successful first round last time, and it really brought me and Anastasis together through exploration of the pelvis and pelvic floor and how important that is and how incredibly interrelated that is to the way we're breathing and how functional our breathing is, or perhaps how dysfunctional it is and a detrimental effect that can have on it. So really happy to be holding the masterclass and to be joining forces with Anastasis to run an instructor training soon, which he's going to tell you much more about. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here and share some knowledge. It's an amazing opportunity when two instructors come together, because you're getting two perspectives and two sort of bags of knowledge, because breathing is so universal. It's always gets individualized when you start learning about it yourself and tailored to your own experience. So yeah, I'll hand it back to you, Anastasis, and we'll go on to primary and secondary muscles or abdominal muscles, but I know you probably want to mention the instructor training first. Hey,
Sure. Yeah, so there is this course that we are due to launch, and I'm saying launch because it is live on my website, and maybe Georgie can put the link in the chat, but it's not yet available on the Oxygen Advantage platform. It will be in the next week, and there we will be going through everything that those that want to qualify as Oxygen Advantage instructor need to go through. So it's a certification 2 days training that we will be running, but we will be focusing a lot more on our areas of expertise, which is female breathing and the biomechanics, let's call it, or yoga or Pilates exercises, and how these merge with the Oxygen Advantage functional breathing training. So let's start looking a little bit about the muscles of breath. And if you were to, I would like, out of curiosity, for you to type on the chat which you consider. I will keep speaking, but I would like to see on the chat which are the muscles that you would consider being the breathing muscles. And I'm going to, once a few of you have typed, I'm going to read them out, but I want to see, before I start telling them which ones you would consider as breathing muscles. I'll start with the primary one, which obviously everybody will be mentioning. Yes, there you go, diaphragm. So the diaphragm is the primary one. And the reality is that if you look at the diaphragm and if you look at its connections and its attachment and its role, yeah, because the diaphragm does not operate just as a breathing muscle, then you will very quickly make sense of all the other muscles. You don't even need to really study them. Actually, I'm going to tell you that having spent a big part of 2021 and 2022 writing a book, which is hopefully going to be published later in the year, I've done even more research than I had done in previous years on the literature. And there is no consistency among which are the primary and which are the secondary muscles. It's one of the questions that I have on the Breathing for Yoga exam. And it's one of the most confusing ones, because the reality is like, you know, we can call transversus thoracis or intercostal muscles as primary breathing muscles, but also we can call the scalenus and the psoas and the QL and so on. What I'm going to, so let me quickly read: diaphragm, ribs. Ribs are not muscles, but we can maybe call the intercostals, diaphragm, transversus, muscles, intercostals. Okay, not many people braved to write, but yes, so correct. You know, this is like I said, in line with what I was mentioning. I like to really like draw a line between the diaphragm and everyone else. And the reason being because doing that will also highlight the importance of diaphragmatic breathing. And when I'm saying diaphragmatic breathing, it's a very sensitive area because everybody wants to breathe diaphragmatically, but I will argue that a lot of people, like the moment they understand the diaphragm, they usually very quickly go overboard with it. Let me explain what I mean. At the moment, and for all your life, you have been breathing diaphragmatically. You may be surprised because you I don't know, maybe some of you thought, oh, you know what, I was a terrible breather. You have no idea how badly I breathe. And I will tell you that you were breathing diaphragmatically. Maybe your diaphragm was not moving as much as you wish. That's fine, but your diaphragm was moving. I had an experience, which I included in the book, of having a diaphragmatic collapse. Did any of you, I cannot see everyone based on my view, but if you want, you can write on the chat. Did any of you had a diaphragmatic collapse at any stage of your life? The diaphragm flattened out. It went up and didn't move. Any of you? No, I see some heads nodding. Okay, if you had, no. Okay, if you hadn't, that's great. I'm happy for you because it's not a pleasant experience. It usually happens when you fall on your back. And that's usually what happens. So myself and other people that have had this similar experience, they fell off a horse. I mean, I didn't fall off a horse. Your lungs collapse. It might, I'm not sure if it's the same exactly, Stephanie. So Stephanie says that she had her lungs collapse. And it is a shock. You think you were not going to breathe again. So for me, it was just another guy who was like a teenager. We got into a little bit of an argument. He was stronger than me. He pushed me. I still remember it like today. And I fell on my back and like I said, okay, let me start breathing now. But it was not happening. And kind of like with some, like, I don't know, at some point, there was some ability for me to take air in again. But there was this time that there was seconds were passing and they felt like century. Is that sufficient? Okay. A child had Andrea is saying that a child had a pacemaker. Yes, probably a little bit more severe than mine. Usually in people that it happens when they fall on their back, all the 3-5 experiences that I have heard from others, they recovered their breathing for after like, I think 30 seconds to 2 minutes. For me, it was like around that, like a minute and a half. But as you said, but at the same time, we know that the diaphragm does not move fully for as much as we wish. I will give you an example. I will try to speak and not come up with any slides, but there is a slide that we use in the Breathing for Yoga course where there is a diaphragm of a healthy individual and the diaphragm of people that have it's an MRI scan of people with lower back pain. And you will see that the diaphragm of people with lower back pain moves within that much of a range, while there is a much bigger range. And of course, the diaphragm at the front and the back moves differently. The diaphragm at the back of the body moves a lot more. So, okay, now we know that we want the diaphragm to move. We know our diaphragm moves all the time. What does it take for the diaphragm to move? A lot. And I will argue it has to be free to move. The diaphragm, we can potentially stretch it, and there is a lot of this is where a lot of chiropractors and osteopaths and people that do manual work and massage therapists, I think a lot of divers do. I had some diver clients that they were doing a lot of like, I'm going to tilt a little bit my camera and show you that they go and dig. I have a full stomach, cannot go very far, but yes, they go and dig and massage the diaphragm. But if someone's body is very restrictive in terms of moving, their shoulders, their back muscles are very tight, maybe even their abdominals, the diaphragm is not going to move. So ultimately, we want to look, okay, the diaphragm itself can be flexible, but also the muscles around it can be flexible and mobile and maybe strong, especially if they are going to be performing exercises. And with that in mind, I would like us to split the muscles that support the movement of the diaphragm to the ones that belong above the rib cage, yeah, or attached to the rib cage, and the ones that are below. And you will see that this makes sense not only in terms of biomechanics, but also of biochemistry. You will see how the two are merging. So when we speak about the muscles that are above, we have pec minor, which is the muscle we are stretching the moment we do horizontal abduction, ABD. So the moment that you have your hands set in one place and you start rotating, you start stretching anterior deltoids, but also pec minor, a very common stretch in yoga, right? In Pilates as well, I guess. But so this is attaches to the lungs. It will help the lungs expand, right, forwards. Then we have scalene. Sorry, I always pronounce it wrongly. So we have three scalings. We have the anterior, medial, and posterior, which attach to the first and second rib. Now, I bet that maybe some of you believe or maybe have heard of other practitioners saying that we should never move our upper chest. I'm a little bit more coming from an angle of the upper chest needs to move freely, and we don't need to be dominant in terms of our movement of the upper chest. We don't want to see just our upper chest moving. But if, in my experience, the upper chest and upper back does not move, it means that the entire posterior chain, potentially, definitely the upper back muscles, is stiff. Can you imagine of an individual? Let's take a moment, for example, for a second, and put on the side all the theories we know about breathing. So think of an individual that is very stiff. I don't know if you have any relatives that are stiff or any colleagues at work, very stiff, like the sort of people that cannot even move their head. You know, have you come across any people like that? So these individuals are moving like that. And you ask to fully inflate their lungs. And their upper chest, by the way, I had clients like that. These are not imaginary people. If you are surrounded by people that are very flexible, you know, great for you, but it's not everybody's, not everybody like that. And this individual will not move at all his chest. Do you think he can freely move his diaphragm? I would argue it will be a little bit hard. It will be a little bit unlikely. So we have the scalenes that attach to the first and second ribs. And those of you that are yoga practitioners or teachers, you may want to start thinking also in terms of chakras, because when we have I'm sorry, I forget the insertion of the scalings. I think it is maybe C3, it must be C3, C5, where the phrenic nerve passes as well. But it goes to the rib. Which area do we cover? We cover the throat. So we have the fifth chakra. Yeah. And then we have the ribs further and further down. So in literature, you will find sometimes the traps. So let's wrap up so that we can move on. We have the traps, which primarily will affect the not only in the upper part of the lungs, but also the back of the lungs, because the traps run all the way down to the middle of the spine. The traps, the deltoids, and I will give you an example now again from a study done in China. So pec minor, third group, let's call it, as the muscles that we can call secondary respiratory muscles above the heart, above the ribs. Yeah. Now, let me give you quickly about the shoulders. So far, I have not mentioned the shoulders, but who would argue that the shoulders do not affect our posture? Actually, if I was to pick on, ask any of you to say, can you demonstrate poor posture? Yeah, without even defining if I'm speaking about the posture of the hips or the posture of the feet, would you bet that most people would show something like that? Yeah, or something like that, or something like that would look awkward in the shoulder area. So when they assessed children, it was like, I think 10 years old children, and again, I think this study, it was included also in the book, 10 years old children that were going to school, and they were measuring the lung capacity. They found that the ones that had a more pronounced kyphosis, the kyphosis is something that naturally we all have at the back of our lungs, where the heart is, but in some people it can be pronounced. Imagine like a 𝗚𝗲cie𝗿𝗶𝗶 type, you know, a very rounded back. So the ones that had a pronounced kyphosis had smaller lung capacity. Let me tell you what else they found in these groups. I think it was a series of studies, but in this group of children, the ones that were carrying very heavy bags, which ended up promoting this posture, were also having a much smaller lung capacity. So carrying a lot of load, especially in the early stages of life, having a very poor posture will diminish the size of the lungs. Now, we know that this is not something that we want. someone that has smaller lungs, will they be able to recruit their diaphragm as much? Or we will end up having a diaphragm that is compressed. Yeah. Let's go to the second group of muscles. So by the way, what is the take home here message? Because, you know, I think, you know, we love theory, we love science, but we are both practitioners. I mean, if you follow Georgie or me, we do practice a lot. And that's what we like to teach. And I think it is common sense to say that unless you put these things into practice, you are not going to understand them. That's something that we are hoping to do a lot in our training in August, by the way. We want to keep the theory to the basic, to the minimal, so that we deliver, but then that's why we are doing it in person. It's much easier. Now, let's go to the muscles underneath the lungs or the heart. There we have two groups. We have two muscles, which I mentioned briefly, maybe some of you picked them up, that attach to the diaphragm. Now, let me tell you this. I have triceps, and the triceps attach to the elbows and the shoulder muscle. If my triceps are tight, aren't my shoulder muscles going to also be restricted? Yeah? I mean, I hope I'm not shocking anyone here. I'm not. So would it be an exaggeration to say that by having these two muscles that are attached to the posterior part of the diaphragm being tight, we are also going to restrict our diaphragm? Now, this is a very theoretical example, but unfortunately, I will share with you another anecdotal story of how I know firsthand that this is the case. So this is now, we are in 2022. In March 2021, I had an injury. Yeah? My injury and my experiences. This should be the theme of the workshop. And I had an injury that started from my QL on the right side. I didn't look after it in the beginning. It ended up becoming a whole right side painful experience for my lower back, to the extent that it was hurting sometimes walking. The fascia there was, in my opinion, damaged, and it came when it was flared up a lot. I ended up feeling pain in my diaphragm. I was feeling pain when I was performing actions such as coughing or whatever it was that were recruiting the diaphragm. This is the nasty way of discovering that your lower back muscles and your diaphragm are linked. If you don't believe me, you can injure yourself, or you can wait for such an experience. I don't think anyone is looking forward to that. But I'm trying to say these things because, like, it's beautiful to say, oh, you know, pull out diagrams and and speak about theories. But if we don't experience them, it's difficult. Maybe we can even question them. Like, okay, you know, is it for real? I don't have an experience on tight psoas, but I'll tell you what about the psoas. Having worked with people that are very flexible, and this is the thing, some of these things, maybe some of you will connect, and some of you may feel, oh, I cannot feel it. Well, we all have different constitution, and those of you that are coaches and practitioners and teachers, I bet that you know that the same exercise, the same cue, the same exercise you will not get the same response from a few different people, correct? You give one exercise to someone, even the oxygen advantage exercises, right? You give it to someone, they drop into a different state. They are like, they see the effect. You give it to someone else and like, they do this like, you know, okay, whatever. So what should I feel? So the people that are very flexible will get a much better response in terms of how they breathe when they will perform stretches for their shoulders, whether they are static, whether fascia stretches and so on, or fascia, like nerve flashing type of thing. But the next one, and that's where I will finish, because this is really the biggest of all areas. The last thing that we can consider a secondary respiratory muscle below the heart, below the lungs, is the abdominals. Now, the abdominals can be classified in many different groups. And the most common one, I would say, at least definitely among those that practice Pilates, but I think it's a nice, simple way and makes sense, is to group them into inner and outer unit muscles. So we have the outer unit muscles, we have the rectus abdominis, the six-pack, we have the obliques. And again, if you look at the literature, you will not find consistency in terms of what are the external and internal muscles. You will find in some papers calling the internal obliques belonging to the inner unit. But anyway, for now, we will include all the obliques as the outer unit, and we have the inner unit. And the inner unit consists of transverse abdominis, which we can think of it as a corset running around our midsection. TRA, sometimes called TA, sometimes it's abbreviated. Then we have multifidus, which is two strings running across our spine, two like ropes. And we can stretch them, but we cannot really recruit them so easily. With the transverse abdominis, we can recruit them, but we will speak about this later on in the session, depending on the time available. And then we have pelvic floor, for which Georgie will be speaking a lot more in a second. And we have the diaphragm. So we can think of this: diaphragm at the top, we have one lead, pelvic floor at the bottom, second lead, a corset, a cylinder running around the middle, and two strings at the back. And this is our inner unit. And as the diaphragm is part of our abdominals, we can call it, and a lot of people do, we are not going to be the only ones, considering it as a postural muscle. Actually, it is not just us calling it a postural muscle. It is actually part of our, it's a key muscle when it comes to looking at the development of a baby. So I think it is around 3 to 4 months that the diaphragm gets most of its posture shortened, but it is that coincides with the time that the baby will start moving arms and legs. Maybe they will not be crawling yet, but they will be moving. But this movement of the arms and the legs in a supine position means what? They need core strength. They are not strong enough to stand, but they still need core strength, which means that they need their diaphragm to start moving their arms and legs. Before that, no strong diaphragm, no moving of the arms and the legs. And I'm going to, if you have questions, you can even start writing them down and we can go back and look at them. You don't have to wait to write them at the end. I'll now be passing the microphone, the virtual microphone, to Georgie.
Okay, awesome, guys. Anastasis, I've sent you an image via WhatsApp just because I've just realized I can't share the screen. So if you could, when you're ready, just grab that image and share it. That would be awesome.
I will.
Awesome. Hi, guys. So I just want to move on. That was amazing with Anastasis to talk about the complexity of the core. You know, I think we could do a 6-hour training on just the core and we'd only cover 10%, you know, and any Pilates coaches on here or yoga teachers I'm sure will know, or physiotherapists, which is I'm currently training to be a physiotherapist, so I am on the start of that learning journey, will understand the sheer complexity and how much influence it has over other bodily systems. And great, thank you so much for popping some questions in the chat, guys. We will be going through them at the end, as Anastasis said. So Anastasis is about to get an image up comparing the male and female pelvis, and this is what I'm going to be going through here. There are actually a lot of key differences, as said famously by 𝗚𝗏cie 𝗿𝗶𝗀, women are not small men, and it's really interested in terms perfect, thank you. It's really interesting in terms of when you see a gym, an everyday normal gym. A gym is actually based on farm equipment, which of course many moons ago was a male dominated industry, and it's really interesting that I first noticed with the gym that I always fell off the rowing machine. The seat, I could never ever stay on it because it is not designed for a female pelvis. The same with the spin bike. I was like, wow, I'm getting these strange pains. And, you know, I consider myself really physically fit. And someone said to me, no, it's just the seat. It's not designed for a female pelvis. And it's really, really interesting to think about those structural differences, because looking at it, you can actually see that it's really quite different. So what I'm going to go through today is the difference and how that affects locomotion, movement. And then what I want to take you through for men and women are 3 really effective exercises that can strengthen the pelvic floor muscles particularly, and also why to bother. What's the point in strengthening the muscles around this pelvic area, and how can that help your breathing? So firstly, let's have a little look at the differences. You can see here that the female pelvis is considerably wider than the male pelvis. Now, of course, everything is interconnected, and it's funny, in modern medicine, sometimes in more non-holistic practices, in very classic hospital examples, the body is treated like a car. If you have a sore knee, you go to the knee person. If you have a bad hip, you go to the hip person, etc., etc., etc. If there is something wrong with your heart, you go to cardiology. If there's something wrong with the lungs, you go to respiratory. If there's something wrong with the brain, you're in, you know, neurology, etc. So it's really interesting to really consider how everything is interlinked. And this is why I'm going into physiotherapy, because I love that holistic approach. So the wider pelvis of the female, what this can cause is an increased angle at the knee. We call it the Q angle, and that causes the ankle to roll more. And that's a movement that we call pronation. So if I just use my hand a little bit awkwardly, but it's a bit easier to show, imagine this is my foot. Pronation is an inward rotation of the foot, which, as you can imagine, causes the knee to roll inward as well, and can cause some considerable pain in the pelvis. Now, interestingly enough, we'll talk about more in a moment, if your breathing is not functional, your movement never can be, due to something called intra-abdominal pressure providing postural support and spinal stabilization. So think about it. As women, we're already at a slight disadvantage anyway, with our wider pelvises giving us more opportunity for pronation, a rolling in of the ankle, thereby a rolling in of the knee, giving us pelvic pain. If we're breathing dysfunctionally at the same time, and thereby engaging smaller muscles of the neck, of the lower back, we're a car crash waiting to happen. Do you know what I mean? So with simply the education and awareness of having better alignment of our tendency as we're walking or even exercising, just obviously a more exaggerated version of functional movements, simply by having the awareness, we can eradicate this problem altogether. Now, add on the possibility of being pregnant, of having extra weight in the pelvic region, and that possibility to pronate is even more so, especially due to women's tendency to be a lot more flexible than men, especially in different parts of the menstrual cycle for menstruating women. You see, when estrogen increases during ovulation, it can actually increase elasticity of the ligaments. And so we're a lot more prone around certain parts of the cycle to ACL injuries and to different slips being a lot more impactful on the body than they would perhaps in other areas of the menstrual cycle. Now, for women in the menopause, there's a whole host of other things in terms of bone density, which is why it's very, very important for women approaching menopause to engage in strength training, and for all women, in fact, to really make sure we start off with a lower bone density than men, and our bones decrease in density at a quicker rate. And of course, I'm not just going to focus on the negatives, but in terms of education, it's a lot more beneficial. On a plus side, women are a lot more naturally talented at endurance than men due to our ability to break down glucose in an aerobic way. So there's just a little positive in there, but for these purposes I am only mentioning the negatives. I love being a woman and I celebrate it every single day, but just to make sure everyone knows. Okay, so where was I? Oh yes, so the forefoot to heel width ratio is also larger than women. So I'll say that again if anyone's making notes. The forefoot to heel ratio is a little bit larger in women than in men. Now, because of all these factors, like we talked about before, women have a much higher risk of ACL, that's a connecting ligament in your knee, tears than men due to that larger Q angle. Injury prevention is massively important for women who play impact sports, tennis, football, basketball, anything where you're jumping and landing on your knee, running, etc., anything like that. But I would argue that in general, if we can prevent injuries from something, for example, just like walking, you take a wrong step, you slip down. If you're breathing functionally and moving functionally in the first place, you're much less likely to develop an overuse injury, there we go, over time, or a sudden injury from a misalignment. So it's just worth that knowledge. It's such small changes. So I also did want to, oh, Anastasis, I might have to, or Anastasis, are you able to just press a button to allow me to share the screen? If you press onto participants and click my name, you're actually able to allow screen share, and that might be much easier because there is one more picture I'd love to show you, and then I want to get on to some practicals straight away. So while Anastasis is giving me permission and just give me a, oh, thank you, amazing. So yes, that's what I want. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Oh, amazing. Okay, good. Okay, so this is actually a slide from my female breathing course, but something that I thought was really, really relevant and I wanted to share with you guys. I'll zoom in a bit. There we go. I love this diagram. I think it's fantastic to really reflect the interconnectedness of the pelvic floor and diaphragm. They are structurally bound together by fascial and muscular connections. Something really interesting when Anastasis was also talking about his injury and why when people fall on their back, they have this sudden gasp, they can't breathe, right? Because the diaphragm is inhibited. So dysfunction in pelvic muscles affects the stability of the spine and pelvis. Interestingly, and here's something that I really want you to take note of, hyperventilation contributes to problems with motor control. So in the reverse of if your breathing is, if your moving is dysfunctional, sorry, it's going to trap your breathing. You know, if you say fall or if you're moving out of alignment, that's going to really prohibit the breathing muscles from being free. Similarly, if you're hyperventilating, if you're breathing from the upper chest, if you're breathing through an open mouth, that contributes to problems with motor control. It also contributes to myofascial trigger points that are particularly sensitive and easily aggravated. So the normalization of imbalance in the joints and soft tissue alongside postural and functional breathing training has the potential to modify, relieve, or eliminate symptoms, including chronic pelvic pain. Let me know in the chat if you've ever experienced chronic pelvic pain. It can be something that's really debilitating and is a lot more common in women than in men. And this paragraph at the bottom is a quote from the really famous Leon Chateau, famous physiotherapist that's done amazing work on breathing and movement. And he's found with a lot of patients that by combining the two, it's not like it's one or the other. Me and Anastasis are not breath coaches saying all you need to do is breathe and then you'll be great. No, breathing is one tiny part of the puzzle. If you can optimize your breathing, you will elevate every other thing you do, which is why it's so wonderful to be able to become an instructor, whether that's to teach other people or just to advance your own training and your own knowledge. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and let's have a little look through a couple exercises. So I'm going to keep these seated because I don't want to get everyone lying on the floor and everything like that, because it's just going to take us a year and a day. So let's keep it nice and seated. But one other one that I would, oh my goodness, my words. One other one that I would recommend is a half bridge position, which I will show you guys. But let's do the first two seated. And then if you want to join in with the third and get on the floor and get going, then that's cool. But let's start in the chair. Okay, so firstly, let's just talk a little bit about posture. Anastasis mentioned before, are the shoulders impactful in our posture? Yes, of course they are. So let's bring those shoulders away from the ears. Now, as women, we're very prone to this forward tilt of the pelvis. Now, especially when we're standing up. This is also a very common one. A lot of this, especially if the child is on one hip. And this, as you can imagine, can have an enormous effect. If that poor diaphragm is trying to move down and up with every breath, for anyone that doesn't know, diaphragm is that huge dome-like muscle sitting just underneath the rib cage. If that's trying to move down and up, you're hugely going to mess up that very natural bodily mechanism by leaning over to one side. Similarly, everyone arch your back for me. And try and take what you perceive to be a nice deep diaphragmatic breath. Do you feel how, I actually get a little bit of pain in my lower back. Does anyone else feel a bit of compression? Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. So it's really interesting, right? Because a lot of us, especially if we are actually in important situations, I'm very lucky. I work with quite a lot of high-powered women. I have a politician and I have a woman who is in charge of a very big bank in London. And a lot of them, we had a lot of problems with when they're in important meetings. What did they do? Like this, right? Because they've been taught by public speaking coaches, which are all men, by the way, to show myself, right? Like this. One woman, I kid you not, was actually told to sit like this before starting her speech. Yeah, thank you. I know. Horrific. So anyway, what I'm talking about here is that a lot of things that we assume will elevate us, taking big over breathing, big hyperventilating breaths. Who's done that before something important? Anyone? Yeah, for a big meeting, interview. Yeah. What are we even told to do when we're giving birth? Right? No, that's actually going to stress us out more, and it's also going to throw us out of alignment. So let's get into good alignment, because I really can talk for Britain. So let's focus on the task at hand. Crown of the head balanced over the center of the pelvis. Now, I want everyone to imagine, and I'll stand up for this, but stay seated for me just to make it a bit more obvious. Imagine your pelvis is a bowl of water. Yeah, here's the top of the bowl, and here is the body of the bowl. Okay, now if you tip the pelvis forward, i.e. the bowl, the water is going to fall out the front. That's no good. If you tip the pelvis back, it's going to fall out of the back. So what I want you to do is make that water line nice and level. The problem is, and a lot of Pilates teachers on here will understand, when you ask people, a lot of people say tuck under your tailbone, but unfortunately that results in people doing this. And then the glutes are overly tense, the bottom of the spine is compressed, and the abdominals are overly engaged. In order to engage your core, you don't need to squeeze for dear life. It's actually only about a 20% engagement you need to stay stable. And people will know that simply by standing up and closing their eyes and putting their feet together. You don't fall over. You don't turn into human spaghetti because you have core engagement, but it doesn't need to be overly engaged. So take a second, make sure your feet are planted, and make sure your water line in your bowl of water is level. Okay, good. Now straight away, let's gently bring the lips together, placing tip of the tongue gently on the roof of the mouth, and let's start to breathe in and out through the nose. The nose is directly connected to the diaphragm. The diaphragm is directly connected to the pelvic floor. Nasal breathing is incredibly important to build a strong pelvic floor, because if we're not utilizing the diaphragm by breathing through the mouth, utilizing the upper chest instead, our zone of apposition decreases. What is that? That's simply the ability for the diaphragm to move all the way down and all the way back up again. That's a big problem, because when the diaphragm moves down, not only does it support the spine, it also gives your digestive and reproductive organs a nice little massage, which is really important for longevity and health of those key organs. Now, if we're breathing in and out through the mouth and the upper chest, the diaphragm is basically going like this. Do you see how it's not quite, it's a bit awkward, isn't it? It's not quite making it back up, right? Instead of actually breathing through the nose, bringing it back to its resting position. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine a nice biomechanical optimal breath with a very gentle pelvic tilt. Now, I know before we actually put the body out of alignment to see how difficult it was to breathe. But when you actually utilize an expansion of your lower ribs with a pelvic tilt, you can actually feel a nice exaggeration of that engagement of the lower ribs that we're looking for. So everyone pop your hands on your lower ribs for me, and let's just gain that awareness, and then we'll add the pelvic tilt, okay? So nice alignment. If you have lower back problems, just make sure you've got something supporting your back. And let's just start by pulling the ribs apart and lifting them up. Good. Don't worry about breathing for now. We'll just get the biomechanics going, and then we'll include the breath. Lower the ribs and bring hands back together. One more time like that. Pull the ribs apart, lift them slightly without lifting the shoulders. Notice how far your ribs can actually go. They're pretty elastic if you allow them to be. Lower them and bring them back together. Good. Okay, this time, pull your ribs apart and allow a tiny bit of air to come in through your nose. Do you notice how much from the tiniest bit of air, the ribs inflate enormously? Because we've removed effort, allow them to deflate naturally. Good. And again, gently pull the ribs apart, allow a tiny bit of air to come in through your nose, and notice the expansion from just a small bit of air. Good. Notice when inhale turns to exhale, don't force it, and allow the ribs to naturally contract. Amazing. Okay, let's add a pelvic tilt and see what happens. When you move in this way, from this place of relaxation, you'll notice that actually a pelvic tilt furtherly expands the ribs rather than prohibiting them. So there's a big difference, not just in the type of movement you do, but how you move. Two people could go to a yoga class, and one, it could be completely detrimental for them if they're giving it, right, you know, fully turning it into yoga hip hop, right? And the other person is moving in a very conscious way where they're moving within their own capabilities. The person teaching me to be a yoga teacher describes yoga as moving good energy and loving information throughout the body, right? And it's a way of moving blood and oxygen, prana, around the body. And the way we do that has to be very, very gentle. We have to be very gentle with ourselves. If we're forcing, pushing, like the world often encourages us to do from children, right? Go, 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 more, you know, then we're more likely to cause detriment to ourselves. So let's place the hands on those lower ribs, and I'm going to give you a little view of the pelvis here, just so you can really see. And we're going to just take 5 breaths. And what I want you to do is just take that gentle inhale, opening and lifting the ribs, and just gently start to move the top of the hip bones forward. Very, very gently. Good. Now, as inhale turns to exhale, just start from the navel, as if the belly button is moving to meet the spine, rounding the shoulders. Maybe you even bring your chin to your chest. Notice how far you want to go, and you should feel quite a nice release in the back body. Let's do that 5 times from here. So inhale very, very gently. Don't follow my pace. Go at your own rhythm. Follow the rhythm of your breath. Open the ribs. Arch the spine slightly, but only to the point that feels comfortable. If this feels stressful at all, stop what you're doing and just take a couple gentle breaths. Good. Exhale and curve the spine. This is a very subtle movement. Good. 4 more times in your own time. Now, could you allow that forward tilt of the pelvis to last the entirety of your inhale? Could you allow that backwards tilt of the pelvis to last the entirety of your exhale? Let the breath lead the way with your movement. That's it. Now, if that feels good, you might want to go a tiny bit further. You might want to notice if you can start to pull your shoulders back, pull your shoulder blades together, maybe even lift your chin. Good. A lengthening of the vertebrae. That's it. And curve. Really, really nice. Okay, good. Let's do that twice more. Inhale. And exhale. Finishing the one you're on now. Gently come back to neutral. Okay. Did that feel stressful for anyone? Or did that feel calming? Thumbs up for stress, thumbs up for calming, thumbs down for stressful, you know what I mean? All right, good, good, good. Did anyone feel that lovely massage of the lower back, pelvis? Really, really nice. That's a lovely one to combine with cadence breathing for anyone who already knows what that is. It was a bit like seated cat-cow. Yes, Andrew, exactly, yeah. Really, really nice. Really nice as well for women who are pregnant, who just want to find a little bit of a release, but don't want to move too suddenly. Let's move on to the next one. Now, this is more of a strengthening exercise for the pelvic floor, but as always, we're going to combine it with the breath. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to give you a view of my legs. Lucky you. All right, and what we're going to do from here is we're just gently going to start to lift one knee up with the inhale and put it down on the exhale. So we're going to inhale, lifting a knee up. Exhale, lifting a knee down. Now, super important before we carry on with this, has your pelvis gone into any sort of tilt, or is that bowl of water still balanced? This exercise is ineffective, even painful, if we have an arched pelvis. Also, if we have a rounded pelvis, the legs become very heavy. You can try it if you want, just for a second, to put your pelvis out of alignment and try and lift the leg. It's very difficult. If you put your pelvis back into alignment, the bowl of water balanced, and then lift the knee, notice how it feels much lighter. Now, what I'd like you to do is start to engage your pelvic floor ever so slightly in order to lift the leg. Could you actually imagine you're lifting the leg from your pelvis? Now, that might sound strange, but ladies, think of it as stopping your pee from coming out. Men, you can think of the same, but just a gentle engagement of that place. Could you imagine you're stopping your pee and lifting your knee from that area? Let's just do that 8 more times, 4 more on each leg. Inhale as you lift up. This is going super slow. And exhale with control as you bring the foot down. Obviously, you can do this stood up as well. It both has the same effect. The strengthening of the pelvic floor occurs here because of the lifting motion the pelvic floor has to engage. Doing it seated is really interesting, and doing it lying on your back is also really interesting, which would look like this. Just marching whilst lying on your back. If you want to up that a level, you can come into a half bridge and march the same, but it's actually the same feeling as if you were sat on a chair, whoops, and lifting those knees up. I have to excuse my location. I'm at my parents' house currently, so the space is very limited, but we adapt. So yes, a couple more of these going with the breath. Just experiment what it feels like and let me know in the comments. Nice, nice, guys. If you want to try it on your back as well, you're welcome to. And just have a look how that feels. Tiny exercises, right? But really, really effective. Hands up. Did you feel your pelvic floor engage in that moment? Yeah, yeah. Okay, lovely, cool. And the next one, the last one we're going to do, Kegels. So much fun, right? Now, Kegels, what are Kegels? Why do people do them? Everyone's heard of them. Kegels is that word that in a lot of conversations, people will go, yeah. And actually it's like, no one actually knows what it means, right? Always really, really fun. So Kegels are essentially just a gentle squeezing and releasing of the pelvic floor muscles. Now, thing is that a lot of people don't know where their pelvic floor muscles actually are. And like I said, it's a great way to understand by that starting and stopping your pee. And you can even try it if you like, you know, in your own time, of course. So let's just practice a little bit together. It's really, really simple. It's simply a clench and release. But they're very, very beneficial. The pelvic floor, it supports the womb, the bladder, and the bowels. And if the muscles are weak, that the pelvic organs can actually lower into the woman's vagina, which can be really uncomfortable, but that's generally the cause of urinary incontinence as well. Especially with men, they can also experience a weakening of the pelvic floor as they age, and they can experience incontinence as well. And a man is much more likely to experience pelvic floor issues if he's had prostate surgery. Okay, but in general, just doing these pelvic floor exercises, remember it's directly connected to the diaphragm. The stronger the diaphragm is, the stronger the pelvic floor is. Like any muscle, the more efficiently it's going to work. Weak muscles use more oxygen. The stronger your muscles are, the less energy it takes to go about your day to day. There's a great thing I teach in our instructor training and female breathing called the cycle of inactivity. And it's all about how when people do less movement, their muscles get weaker. Weak muscles use more oxygen. If you use oxygen less efficiently, something called your Bolt score, what we teach in the Oxygen Advantage, goes down. You're more sensitive to carbon dioxide. You get breathless more easily. You start to fear activity that makes you breathless. You start to feel more intimidated by activity, and then you do less. And then your muscles become weaker, and we go round and round and round and round, right? So let's do a couple Kegels, and then I'll pass the mic back to Anastasis, and we will carry on and storm through. This masterclass is going very, very quickly. We should have made it like 4 hours long, not an hour and a half. But let's just do a couple just to finish out this one. So again, you probably have all done Kegels before, but have you done it linking in with your breathing? What I want you to do is take a very gentle inhale through your nose, making that accordion-like motion of the lower ribs. And as you inhale and everything inflates, I want you to gently squeeze the muscles of the pelvic floor, like you're preventing yourself from urinating. As you exhale, allow the belly button to gently draw to the spine, allow the lower ribs, like the accordion, closing to come back in, and allow front, sides, and back of the pelvis to release, as if you're allowing everything to flow, but not too much, of course. Be careful. All right, 3 more times. Gently expand the ribs. Gentle pressure, gentle squeezing of the pelvic floor. You could almost imagine trying to suck up your pelvic floor up into your spine, up into your abdomen. Exhale, let it go. Anastasis will tell you all, in yoga we call this a Uddiyana Bandha or Mula Bandha. Which one is it, Anastasis, with the pelvis?
Mula.
Mula Bandha, yes. I'm nearly a qualified yoga teacher, so Anastasis is a big, what's the word? Someone I look up to in yoga a lot. All right, good. Keep going, guys. Exhale, release front, sides, back of the pelvis. Just in your own time, experimenting with a couple of these. Again, lying on your back, very effective. You can do them standing up, all have different benefits. Lying on your back is good because it takes the effect of gravity away. Last time, inhale, feel a gentle engagement, like you're sucking your pelvic floor up into your abdomen. Exhale, let everything go. Okay. Nice, nice. How did it feel combining the breathing and the clenching and releasing? Different, right? More effective. Nods, thumbs, typing. Yes, nice. Okay, good. Good, guys. It can be the other way around, Jessica. Absolutely. So it depends. It depends. When you're creating that intra-abdominal pressure, that is with your spine. So that's the rib cage sort of creating a balloon-like effect with the spine. Now, actually, that gives more space for you to practice an engagement of the pelvic floor. But similarly to a squat, you can inhale as you go down and exhale as you come up, or exhale as you go down and inhale as you come up. It depends, and sometimes it's on preference. Every instructor has a different opinion on it. You know, where should the inhale be? Where should the exhale be? With some things, it's universal. Generally, exhale on the exertion, right? But with this one, I find it really effective actually to inhale because of that imagery of sucking something up, personally. But try it the other way around, you know, see how it goes. It's always an experiment. Anastasis, throwing it back to you.
Thank you. I think we will be opening it up now to questions. That was the original plan, to leave like 30 to 20 minutes for questions. I think we have another 27 minutes. So there are a few questions that have been put on the chat. As you may noticed when registering for this masterclass, this is the first of two masterclasses, and yeah, we will be going through some of the remaining topics in the next one. But you know, if you have questions in general to us about things that we didn't necessarily touch on, but you think that we can, it is worth sharing our opinion, you can let us know in the, you know, in the chat. So I'm going to start with two questions that have already been put up. The first being about the psoas and whether the psoas is considered a muscle. So yes, it is a muscle. There are two actually. It's the psoas major and psoas minor. And psoas major, if you were to, I'm not going to ask Georgie to put up her beautiful graph, but it was very dominant. It's a very thick muscle. It's actually a very strong muscle. And yeah, in a way, basically together with QL is the muscles that connect the lower and upper body. So whenever we have any consistent patterns of exaggerated pelvic misalignment or pelvic misalignment or pelvic, like, you know, yeah, as people are stuck sometimes in the anterior position or the posterior position, it has to do with the psoas being overly tight or overly stretched. But of course, as we know already, this will obviously affect the way that someone breathes. As I said, I had a lot of positive experience when with students in yoga classes. Of course, you know, these people are already tuned in with the importance of breathing by now. When we were doing stretches for the psoas, and of course, stretches for the psoas always have to be accompanied by stretches for the quads and so on. They were breathing better. Yeah, so this is number one. And if we were to get out of this screen and join back the actually, we don't even need, I can bring up the chat. There was another question about whether we know that, how do we know that the diaphragm is strong? And I think it will be worth to maybe why don't you, Georgie, start speaking about that, because Georgie also did a free divers course, and it will be very interesting for everyone to hear her opinion on that through free diving, female breathing, and for women, and then I will answer I'll give you my answer.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's a couple of ways to know if you have a strong diaphragm or not. And number one, the easiest is probably to try a bit of cadence breathing. I first do that with my clients by about session 2, we do a little bit of cadence breathing, which is simply breathing at a respiratory rate of 5.5 to 6 breaths per minute. And a way you can do it is to breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 6. Now, if you're struggling to get to the end of 4 or to the end of 6, or one or the other, then generally that's going to indicate there's some weakness biomechanically, especially if you have a high BOLT score. And if anyone that comes onto the training, you'll be learning all about the body oxygen level test and how that relates to your carbon dioxide tolerance. Essentially, the more sensitive you are to carbon dioxide, the more quickly you're going to become breathless, and the more effort it's going to take from a respiratory perspective to perform intense activities or everyday activities in general. So you're going to be less efficient with your oxygenation and energy usage, of course, and also the way you convert glucose into energy, which is obviously a process really dependent on oxygen. And so if your diaphragm is weak, you can really tell by that exercise. You can even try it now a couple of times. Breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. Notice if you're able to get to the end of those counts. If you're struggling with the inhale, chances are your inspiratory muscles, and Anastasis said how complicated the muscles of the abdomen are, primary and secondary. He covered there's even more, than that, that your inspiratory muscles are a bit weaker. If you're struggling to get to the end of the 6 on the exhale, that's going to suggest your expiratory muscles are a bit weaker. Now, why am I saying this? Yes, your question was about the diaphragm, was because the diaphragm is the key muscle facilitating it all. And you see, the muscle has walls, and if the walls are not of a good thickness, that's how they become stronger. It's a dome shape, they become thicker. Then it has to move a lot faster in order to get the same effect. And it tires a lot more quickly. To finish the answer here, that has a big effect on your blood flow. So if your diaphragm is working super hard, because it's only got thin walls, and so it needs to move a lot quicker to get the same effect as someone with a strong diaphragm, that maybe, say, 2 people running at the same speed, one person's diaphragm is thin and working super hard. The other person's diaphragm, even though they're running at the same intensity, is moving a lot slower because the walls are stronger. That first person, the diaphragm is going to get tired, and all the blood flow, or a lot of it, will rush to assist the diaphragm that's becoming fatigued, because breathing is always prioritized. They get jelly legs, they get jelly arms, they get lactic acid buildup because of this diaphragmatic fatigue. So having a strong diaphragm is super beneficial, not just for sports, but for efficiency of energy in general. And having a weak diaphragm, if it's directly connected to the pelvic floor, having a weak diaphragm results in a weak pelvic floor. Strengthening your pelvic floor strengthens your diaphragm. Functional breathing also strengthens your diaphragm, which then strengthens your pelvic floor. So it's really, a kind of 3-for-1 deal here with this breathing thing. So yeah, should we move on to the next question?
There is, yes, there is a question. I would like to give a slightly different approach to that, but before, first of all, there is a request for you to repeat what you just said, but also there is also probably a question with some misspelling. So maybe I will ask Andrea to resubmit the question. It says, isn't active exhalation, which is after inhalation and exhalation, we have the exhalation. So anyway, I think Andrea wants to probably means exhalation. Maybe Andrea can resubmit the question and you can repeat what you just said.
Yeah, I'm just typing it in the chat.
As this will not, the chat will not be available on the recording, why don't you also...
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I just put strong diaphragm equals strong pelvic floor, and a weak pelvic floor can lead to a dysfunctional diaphragm because one has an effect on the other, and that dysfunctional breathing is going to exacerbate your breathing muscles, whereas functional breathing is going to elevate them. That's my summary of the answer.
Thank you. I would say that there is, while I'm not familiar with any absolute test that would tell that now you have a strong diaphragm, until now you didn't, you can look at it from, well, I'm going to basically say the same things that Georgie said, but I will form it in a slightly different way. Maybe it will make sense for some. And what is the point here is that we can look at it through the biochemistry. So, for example, what is your tolerance to carbon dioxide? How long can you hold your breath, whether you're doing a bolt score or whether you're doing other maximum holds? After a point, you will start feeling your diaphragm performing some spasms. How many of them can you endure? There are exercises that can increase your tolerance to these spasms. This is obviously a way to get your diaphragm stronger. So then we are working just with the biochemistry. But another way to, and of course, the more you can tolerate them and the longer you can hold your breath, the stronger your diaphragm becomes. The other way to look at it, though, is in terms of by the biomechanics. So if someone, let's take a very simple core exercise that everybody is familiar with when it comes to, for example, a plank. So a plank will definitely increase the demands of our midsection. How long can you hold the plank? Remember what we said before about the inner unit, the abdominals being split into inner and outer unit. So obviously, the inner unit will be very much there. And I didn't elaborate a lot about the functions of the inner and the outer unit, but yeah, let's not get into that. But the diaphragm will be part of it. If you cannot hold a plank for long, you can assume that the diaphragm is also weak. Does it mean that it's only the diaphragm's responsibility? No, clearly not. But is it also the diaphragm's responsibility? And I will argue that yes. So, and this is really opens a kind of, in a way, the kind of worms, because you can say, okay, so when I do squats, am I using my diaphragm? Yes, if you do squats that are very like challenging towards your maximum capacity of increasing intra-abdominal pressure, you are. But so you are when you're performing, let's say, those of people that are very keen on vinyasa style classes, chaturanga, or even spine extensions like back bends, or if you are practicing swimming. Swimming is a fantastic exercise to improve your breathing, to improve your inner unit as well. Yeah, that's why it's the most commonly advised exercise for kids with asthma. So I would say, like, it is useful to make it case specific. And you know, if we're working with someone that is, we know that they're weak. Yeah, if we can use this very vague general term, weak, we can start them with very simple exercises that Georgie was demonstrating. These exercises I put on the chat. I don't know if you saw, some of you. Did you feel your abdominals in some of the exercises that she was giving for our pelvic floor? I felt it, and it was a little bit of hard work for me to isolate and maybe recruit more the pelvic floor, because I'm very used to recruiting my midsection. Yeah, I'm a man, in case you didn't notice. So the point here is that you want to be thinking of the whole ecosystem of muscles working in sync, and not, okay, now I'm going to strengthen my diaphragm, but I will ignore the pelvic floor. And today, it's pelvic floor work, forget about the diaphragm.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Anastasis, as well, in going off in my question with the strength of the diaphragm, I see what you mean in freediving. I just did my freediving level 1 and doing a static breath hold. So my first static breath hold of this training was 3 minutes, and that's without hyperventilation. And so it was hugely enduring the pulsing of the diaphragm. And if you give into it, it sort of makes you do this type feeling, and that's reacting to it. Whereas if you're able to relax into it, you actually notice that the contractions start to slow themselves down, but they still are very intense. And just like if you were doing, say, a sit-up or a bicep curl, it's actually the diaphragm strengthening itself. And the more you practice these strong breath holds, the contractions never go away, but they become easier to endure. And it's really interesting as well that if you have a weak diaphragm and a weak pelvic floor, I would hypothesize, do not quote me on this in any scientific directories, but from observing people, I would hypothesize that a weak diaphragm, a weak pelvic floor would result in much faster and much more rapid contractions, and that a much stronger diaphragm and stronger pelvic floor would allow you to be much more at peace. I even noticed through the 5 days of free diving that by day 4, my contractions were considerably less, and probably less than they would have been had I not practiced simulation of high altitude training, which is strong breath holds whilst running, where you also experience, or squatting or press upping, but anyway, you learn that all in more advanced training. But it really is strengthening for the diaphragm, and it's also incredibly good at practicing being uncomfortable, which unfortunately is something that we really need to do in this modern world of excess comfort. We're not meant to be comfortable all the time, you know, it's actually to our detriment. So yes, Anastasis, back to you.
I think that, again, like in the same way that you carried over with what I was saying before, that's also my observation, that people that will have a much higher tendency of hyperventilating, and by hyperventilating, I mean maybe even sighing. Maybe they don't breathe faster, but every so often they will have this heavy sighs, which from time to time they get popular and they get like a lot of praise, which I don't know where they're coming from, but you know, some random studies that are not very well developed. But yes, and this is something that can change over time. It can change after pregnancy. It can change when someone puts on weight. It can change when someone, like I have seen fluctuations on people that have worked over time, where they went from, let's call it, you know, simply good breathers to becoming bad breathers. Same individual, he put on some weight. She went through a pregnancy. He went through a big career stressful events. You can see it, like, you know, if you don't know and you just are on the side observing these two sessions, maybe 1 year apart, and you can hear just the breathing, it will have a difference. It does also link to how strong this individual would be on simple classic core exercises. We will be looking into providing some Georgie and I some support material, which will involve exercises like the ones that we covered today for the training that we are running in the 6th and 7th of August. So those of you that end up signing up, and I'm speaking those of you, not just the present ones, but the people that are going to watch the recording, will be getting access to this as the training comes closer and closer to the date. Thank you very much. One more thing. I don't know if you have anything else to say. What I can do also is give you the registration for the next masterclass, which will be a carryover from this. So you can guys go and register now if you want. Is that going to be helpful? Yeah. So I'm going to put that on the chat. If you have any more questions, please put them on the chat. And otherwise, Georgie, you can say something. I will try to get hold of the link.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much, guys. It's crazy when we start talking about breathing, how an hour and a half just goes. Like when I was teaching my female breathing course, we always ended up, Fleur's here, right? Hi, Fleur. We always ended up doing 2 hours. And anyone that couldn't make the full 2 hours just ended up watching the last 30 minutes of the replay, because there's always so much to talk about. And a lot of people even say, I bet Anastasis have had the same with Fleur, and as well. And hi, Antonio. Lucas's dad is here too. Hey, in Colombia. I just came back from Colombia, which is probably why
the link is on the chat, by the way. So if you can go off and register now, it's in 4 weeks time.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of people are like, how did you make a career out of breathing? Like, it's just in and out, right? And as you can tell from tonight, it's not just in and out. There's so much to breathing, you know, it's the most important biological function we have. There are so many different elements, and it's so impactful. And that's the thing, you can breathe to your benefit or to your detriment. And to breathe to your benefit, you need that innate awareness and that conscious awareness to be able to really optimize everything else you do. I say you'd never build a house on a puddle. So why would you not optimize your breathing and create those strong foundations before doing anything else? You know, whenever I'm working as a PT, I will not let anyone train or move or do any exercise until they understand how to breathe properly whilst doing it, because otherwise they're just walking towards an injury waiting to happen. It's like watching a slowly moving car crash, you know. So I hope you really enjoyed, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Do feel free, me and Anastasis are going to put our Instagrams in the chat now. For anyone watching the replay, is right breathing a feeling of filling your stomach? Okay, so very quickly I will answer this. Filling your stomach, no, not predominantly. We like to focus on a lateral, a sideways expansion of the lower ribs, and your stomach will inflate ever so slightly as a result. The problem is that you can fill or inflate your stomach and not engage the diaphragm. So it's better to think of the lateral expansion first, and then if you want to think of a little excess inflation of the stomach, that can be fine as well, but it's not the key focus, no. Yes. Oh yeah, perfect. So thank you, Anastasis. Anastasis just put a link to my Instagram, which is breathe_with_Georgie. Message me on there if you have any questions about our instructor training or female breathing or breathing for yoga. So many options, it's overwhelming. But yes, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, everyone. See you in 4 weeks' time.
Thanks, guys. Bye, Antonio. Nice to see you.